The day started like any other at Washington Dulles International Airport. People were rushing around, dragging suitcases, checking their watches, and trying to make it through security before their flights. Families with kids, business travelers, in suits and tourists with oversized backpacks filled the terminal. Among them was a young boy about 12 years old traveling with his mom. He was excited about the trip. They were heading to Atlanta to visit relatives. The boy had always been fascinated by airplanes and airports. Every time he saw a plane take off, his eyes lit up. His dream? To become a pilot one day. As they approached the TSA checkpoint, the boy couldn't help but act playful. He pretended to scan boarding passes like an airport employee, making his mom laugh. She smiled at him, enjoying his energy. But as they got closer to the metal detector, something changed. When the boy stepped through the scanner, there was no beep, no alarm, nothing unusual. Yet instead of letting him go, one of the officers signaled for him to stop. The officer, a man with a stern expression, called the boy over. "You need additional screening," he said flatly, not offering much explanation. The boy looked confused. Why was this happening? His mom noticed right away that something wasn't right. She glanced around and saw other passengers walking through the same scanner without being stopped. Some even triggered alarms but were waved through after a quick pat-down. So why was her son singled out? "Why are you picking on him?" she asked calmly. Though her voice carried a hint of frustration, the officer ignored her question and repeated his instructions to the boy. "Just follow procedure, ma'am," he muttered dismissively. The boy was led aside, leaving his mom behind. As he stood there, feeling more and more out of place, his smile faded. He could feel people staring at him, some curious, others uncomfortable. It was embarrassing, and he didn't understand what he'd done wrong. What neither the boy nor his mom knew was that his dad worked at the very same airport. In fact, he held a high-ranking position. He was the newly appointed TSA regional director, overseeing operations across several terminals. Earlier that day, he had left work early, planning to meet his family after they cleared security. He had no idea what was unfolding just a few hundred feet away from his office. Back at the checkpoint, the situation grew tenser. The officer began searching the boy's bag thoroughly, pulling out items one by one. A water bottle, a book, a small toy car. All perfectly normal things for a kid to carry. Still, the officer acted as if he expected to find something suspicious. "Empty your pockets," he ordered sharply. The boy complied silently, unsure of how to respond. His mom watched helplessly, growing angrier by the second. "This isn't fair," she finally blurted out, drawing attention from nearby passengers. He didn't do anything wrong. But the officer didn't budge. Instead, he continued his search, treating the boy as if he were guilty until proven innocent. Other TSA agents stood by, either unwilling or uninterested in stepping in. Passengers passing through the checkpoint slowed down to observe the scene. Some shook their heads disapprovingly, while others whispered among themselves. One elderly woman leaned toward her companion and muttered, "This doesn't look right." Another traveler, a young man with headphones dangling around his neck, pulled out his phone to record the interaction. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd gathered, murmuring about what they were witnessing. Meanwhile, the boy's mom tried everything she could think of to de-escalate the situation. She spoke firmly but politely, asking for clarification and demanding to speak to a supervisor. But each request seemed to fall on deaf ears. Frustrated and worried, she decided to document the incident herself, pulling out her phone to record the exchange. Little did anyone know, the real twist in this story was about to unfold, and it would change everything. The situation grew worse as the boy was taken to a small, windowless holding room near the security checkpoint. His mom wasn't allowed to go inside with him, which made her even more upset. She stood outside, pacing back and forth, trying to figure out what to do next. The TSA officer who had singled him out, let's call him Officer Greg, followed the boy into the room and closed the door behind them. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy, almost suffocating. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Officer Greg wasted no time, He instructed the boy to empty his pockets again and spread his arms wide for another pat-down. The boy, still confused and now visibly nervous, did as he was told. "What are you looking for?" he asked softly, his voice trembling. "Officer." Greg didn't answer. Instead, he rummaged through the boy's backpack once more, pulling out every single item and inspecting it closely. A granola bar wrapper, a crumpled receipt, a pencil, nothing unusual. But Officer Greg handled each object as if it were evidence of some hidden crime. Outside the room, the boy's mom was losing patience. She approached a nearby TSA supervisor, demanding answers. "Why is my son being treated like this? What did he do wrong?" she asked, her tone sharp but controlled. The supervisor shrugged, offering vague explanations about standard procedures and random checks. But the mom wasn't buying it. She pointed out that other passengers hadn't been treated the same way, even when they triggered alarms or acted suspiciously. Her frustration mounted as the supervisor avoided giving a straight answer. Back in the holding room, the boy's emotions began to spill over. He tried to stay calm, but it was hard not to feel scared and humiliated. Tears welled up in his eyes as Officer Greg continued his relentless questioning. "Why do you have these items in your bag?" he asked, holding up the pencil as if it were contraband. The boy stammered, unsure how to respond. It's just a pencil," he managed to say. Officer Greg's expression didn't soften. If anything, he seemed annoyed that the boy dared to question him. As the minutes dragged on, the tension escalated. Outside, the crowd of onlookers grew larger. Some people whispered among themselves, while others openly criticized the TSA officers for their handling of the situation. One man stepped forward and addressed the mom directly. "This isn't right," he said. "They're treating your son unfairly." She nodded, grateful for the support, but still overwhelmed by the injustice of it all. She decided to keep recording everything on her phone, hoping the footage might help later. Unbeknownst to everyone, including the boy and his mom, the boy's dad was already on his way to meet them. Earlier that day, he had left work early, planning to surprise his family after they cleared security. He had no idea what was happening at the checkpoint. As he made his way through the terminal, he noticed a commotion near the TSA area. People were gathered, talking animatedly, and some were filming with their phones. Something didn't feel right. When he got closer, he saw his wife standing near a group of TSA officers, visibly distressed. At first, he thought maybe there was a mix-up with their tickets or luggage. But then he spotted the holding room where his son was being detained. His heart sank. Without hesitation, he walked over to his wife and asked, "What's going on?" She turned to him, relief washing over her face. "They pulled him aside for no reason," she explained quickly, her voice shaking. "They won't tell us why, and they're treating him horribly." The dad's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the holding room, anger bubbling inside him. Then, taking a deep breath, he approached one of the TSA supervisors. "I'd like to know what's happening here," he said firmly. The supervisor looked at him, surprised by his authoritative tone. Before long, the dad revealed his identity. He was the TSA regional director, the person ultimately responsible for overseeing operations at this airport. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people realized who he was. Even the TSA officers froze, clearly shocked. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the dad demanded access to the holding room. "Let me see my son," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. The officers hesitated but eventually complied, opening the door. Inside, the boy sat slumped in a chair, tears streaming down his face. When he saw his dad walk in, his expression shifted from fear to relief. "Dad!" he cried, rushing into his arms. The dad hugged him tightly, feeling a mix of rage and heartbreak. He knelt down to look his son in the eye. "You didn't do anything wrong," he assured him. "This isn't your fault." For the boy, hearing those words was a lifeline. He had spent the last half hour feeling like he was in trouble, like he had somehow messed up. Now seeing his dad standing up for him, he began to feel a little better. But the dad knew this wasn't just about comforting his son. It was about holding the system accountable. and he had every intention of doing exactly that. Stepping back out into the terminal, the dad confronted the TSA staff. He listened as his wife recounted everything that had happened, showing him the video she had recorded. With each detail, his resolve hardened. This wasn't just negligence, it was discrimination. And as the TSA regional director, he had the power and the responsibility to make sure something like this never happened again. The dad's presence changed everything. As soon as he stepped out of the holding room with his son by his side, the entire atmosphere shifted. People stopped talking, their eyes glued to him. The TSA officers who had been so dismissive moments ago now looked uneasy, shifting their weight from one foot to the other. Even Officer Greg, the man who had detained the boy, seemed to shrink under the dad's intense gaze. "This is unacceptable," the dad said, his voice firm but controlled. He didn't shout, but there was no mistaking the authority in his tone. "My son did nothing wrong. He walked through the scanner without triggering any alarms, and yet he was singled out for additional screening." "Why?" the supervisor stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Sir, we were just following standard protocol." "Standard protocol?" the dad interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Then explain this." He gestured toward the crowd of onlookers, many of whom nodded in agreement. Other passengers set off alarms or acted suspiciously, but none of them were treated like my son. Do you know why that is? Because this isn't about protocol. This is about bias. The accusation hung heavy, in the air. No one dared to argue with him, not when he held such a high position within the TSA. But the dad wasn't done. He turned to Officer Greg, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Tell me, Officer Greg, what exactly made you flag my son? Was it because he fit some kind of profile?" Officer Greg hesitated, glancing around as if searching for support from his colleagues. When none came, he finally spoke. "I was doing my job, sir. That's all." The dad leaned in slightly, his expression unwavering. "Your job is to keep people safe, not to humiliate innocent children based on stereotypes. And let me make something very clear. You work for me. I'm the regional director here. If anyone should be reviewing procedures and ensuring fairness, it's me, not you." The words hit like a punch. Officer Greg opened his mouth to respond, but thought better of it. Instead, he took a step back, avoiding eye contact. The dad didn't press further, at least not right then. Turning to his wife, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "We'll fix this." But fixing it wouldn't be easy. The damage had already been done. The boy, still clinging to his dad's arm, looked shaken. His tears had dried, but the hurt lingered in his eyes. The dad knelt down again, speaking directly to him. "Listen to me," he said gently. "You are amazing. You didn't do anything wrong, and you have every right to walk through that airport proudly. What happened today doesn't define you, it defines them. And we're going to make sure they understand that." The boy nodded slowly, though it was clear he was still processing everything. His mom hugged him tightly, whispering words of encouragement. Meanwhile, the dad stood up and addressed the growing crowd of onlookers. "Thank you all for standing witness to this," he said. "What happened here today shouldn't happen to anyone. It's not fair and it's not acceptable. We need to hold ourselves accountable and demand better." His words resonated with the crowd. Some nodded in agreement while others clapped quietly. One woman stepped forward and handed him her business card. "I'm a journalist," she said. "If you want to share your story, I'd be happy to help amplify it." The dad accepted the card graciously, knowing that shining a light on this incident could lead to meaningful change. With the immediate situation under control, the dad decided to take action. He called an impromptu meeting with senior TSA leadership, including Officer Greg and several supervisors involved in the detention. They gathered in a nearby conference room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The dad wasted no time getting to the point. "I've seen the footage," he began, placing his phone on the table. On the screen was the video his wife, had recorded earlier, a clear record of how unfairly his son had been treated. This is discrimination, plain and simple, and it stops now. One of the supervisors tried to defend the actions of the officers, claiming they were following guidelines, but the dad wasn't having it. He pointed out inconsistencies in how different passengers were treated throughout the day. For instance, a businessman who triggered multiple alarms during screening was let go after a brief pat-down, while his son, who hadn't triggered any alarms, was subjected to a lengthy and invasive search. These aren't isolated incidents, the dad continued. They're symptoms of a larger problem. Bias exists in our system whether we want to admit it or not. And until we address it head-on, situations like this will keep happening. As the meeting went on, other employees began speaking up. Some admitted they had witnessed similar cases of racial profiling in the past but felt powerless to intervene. Others shared stories of being reprimanded for questioning unfair practices. The dad listened carefully, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. By the end of the discussion, it was clear that systemic issues ran deep within the TSA, and addressing them would require more than just disciplining a few individuals. Before concluding the meeting, the dad laid out a plan. First, Officer Gregg and the officers involved in the boy's detention would face disciplinary action. Second, new training programs would be implemented to educate TSA agents on recognizing and combating implicit bias. Finally, independent oversight committees would be established to review cases of alleged misconduct and ensure accountability moving forward. When the meeting ended, the dad felt a mix of emotions. Relief that steps were being taken, yes, but also anger that such measures were necessary in the first place. As he walked back to his family, he knew this was only the beginning of a long journey toward justice. But for now, he focused on comforting his son and reassuring him that things would get better. "You're strong," he told the boy, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Stronger than anyone who tried to make you feel small today. Remember that." And, for the first time since the ordeal began, the boy smiled. A small, tentative smile, but a smile nonetheless. The next few days were a whirlwind for the family. News of what happened at the airport spread quickly, thanks in part to the journalist who had approached the dad during the incident. She wrote an article detailing the events, including quotes from witnesses and excerpts from the video the mom had recorded. The story went viral almost overnight, sparking conversations across social media platforms and news outlets. People were outraged, heartbroken, and eager to support the family. For the boy, life suddenly felt like it was under a microscope. Strangers recognized him when he went out with his parents. Some offered kind words, telling him how brave he was. Others shared their own stories of being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. At first, the attention overwhelmed him. He wasn't used to being at the center of something so big, and it made him feel self-conscious. But as time passed, he began to see that his experience could help others. That realization gave him strength. His mom played a crucial role in helping him process everything. She sat down with him often, encouraging him to talk about his feelings. "It's okay to be upset," she told him one evening as they sat together, on the couch. "What happened to you wasn't fair and no one should have to go through that, but you're not alone. We're here for you, and so are all the people who care about making things better." Her words meant a lot to him, but healing wasn't easy. There were moments when he felt angry at the officer who detained him, angry at the system that allowed it to happen, and even angry at himself for feeling scared. His dad noticed these struggles and took time to sit with him too. "You know," he said during one of their talks, "being strong doesn't mean you never feel hurt or afraid. It means you keep going even when those feelings try to hold you back. You've already shown so much courage just by standing tall after what happened." The dad also knew that actions spoke louder than words. So, he didn't stop at calling meetings or disciplining officers. He pushed for real, lasting change within the TSA. He worked tirelessly, collaborating with experts in diversity training, civil rights advocates, and even psychologists to develop programs aimed at addressing implicit bias. These weren't just surface-level initiatives. They were designed to challenge mindsets and create a culture of fairness and respect. One of the most impactful changes came in the form of revamped training modules for TSA agents. These modules included interactive scenarios where agents had to make decisions based on various passenger profiles. The goal was to highlight how biases can influence judgment and teach agents to approach every situation objectively. Feedback sessions followed each module, allowing participants to reflect on their choices and learn from mistakes in a safe environment. But the dad didn't stop there. He understood that accountability was key to preventing future incidents. To ensure transparency, he introduced independent oversight committees composed of external experts and community representatives. These committees reviewed cases of alleged misconduct, investigated complaints, and provided recommendations for improvement. Their presence sent a clear message. No one was above scrutiny, not even TSA leadership. Despite these efforts, resistance lingered within certain parts of the organization. Some veteran employees grumbled about the new policies, claiming they added unnecessary layers of bureaucracy. A few even argued that profiling was sometimes necessary for security reasons. The dad heard these complaints but refused to compromise. Security is important, he acknowledged during a staff meeting. But so is dignity. We can protect people without stripping them of their humanity. If we lose sight of that, then we've failed, not just as an agency but as human beings. As weeks turned into months, the impact of the reforms became evident. Reports of discriminatory behavior dropped significantly, and passengers began noticing a difference in how they were treated at checkpoints. Social media posts praising TSA agents for their professionalism started popping up more frequently. One traveler shared a story about how an agent went out of their way to assist her elderly mother, while another recounted how smoothly their screening process went despite having medical equipment in their bag. Each positive interaction helped rebuild trust between the TSA and the public. Meanwhile, the family continued to heal and grow stronger together. The boy slowly regained his confidence, finding joy in the little things again, playing outside, with friends, reading his favorite books, and dreaming about flying planes someday. His passion for aviation hadn't faded, and neither had his determination to make a difference. Inspired by his dad's advocacy work, he began thinking about ways he could contribute too. Maybe he could become a pilot who spoke out against injustice or worked to make air travel accessible to everyone. The possibilities excited him. His mom also found purpose in the aftermath of the incident. She joined local groups focused on racial equality and education, using her voice to raise awareness about systemic issues. Together with her husband, she attended community forums, gave interviews, and supported other families who had faced similar challenges. Their partnership strengthened as they navigated this journey side by side, united by a shared mission to create a better world for their son and others like him. Through it all, the dad remained steadfast in his commitment to change. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be setbacks and obstacles to overcome. But he believed progress was possible if people stayed vigilant. And he wasn't alone in this belief. Across the country, individuals inspired by the family's story started taking action in their own communities. Teachers incorporated lessons on bias and empathy into their classrooms. Employers revisited their hiring practices to ensure fairness. Even airlines began partnering with advocacy organizations to improve customer experiences. By the end of the year, the family looked back on everything they'd been through with a mix of emotions. There was sadness for the pain they endured, gratitude for the support they received, and hope for the future they were helping to build. They knew the fight wasn't over, but they also knew they had made a difference, and that gave them immense pride. As they prepared for another trip to visit relatives, this time with lighter hearts, the dad reminded his son of something important. No matter where you go or what happens, always remember your worth, he said. You're incredible just as you are, and nothing anyone says or does can ever take that away from you. With those words echoing in his mind, the boy smiled brightly, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The family's journey didn't stop at healing or implementing reforms within the TSA. They knew the ripple effects of what happened could extend far beyond their personal lives and even the airport system. This realization led them to take their advocacy a step further, to inspire change on a broader scale. It wasn't just about fixing one broken system. It was about creating awareness, fostering understanding, and empowering others to stand up against injustice wherever they saw it. One evening, as the boy sat with his parents at the dinner table, he asked a question that had been on his mind for days. Why do people treat each other so badly sometimes? His voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if he feared the answer might be too heavy for him to handle. His mom and dad exchanged a glance before responding. It's complicated, his dad began, leaning forward slightly. Sometimes people act out of fear or ignorance. They don't understand someone who looks different from them, so instead of learning, they judge. Other times, systems are set up in ways that make unfairness easier to happen. But here's the thing. You have the power to break those patterns. Every time you choose kindness, every time you speak up when something isn't right, you're making the world better. The boy nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Though he still didn't fully grasp all the complexities of bias and discrimination, he understood one thing clearly. He wanted to help. That desire sparked an idea, a way for him and his family to turn their painful experience into something positive. Together, they decided to launch a grassroots campaign called Fly with Dignity. The goal was simple, yet powerful: to advocate for fairness and respect in air travel while addressing the deeper issues of racial profiling and systemic bias. The campaign quickly gained momentum, fueled by the family's story and the widespread support they'd received since the incident. People from all walks of life joined in, eager to contribute to the cause. The first major initiative under Fly with Dignity was a series of workshops held at schools, community centers, and workplaces. These workshops focused on educating people about implicit bias, how it forms, how it affects behavior, and most importantly, how to challenge it. The sessions were interactive, using real-life scenarios to encourage participants to reflect on their own assumptions and actions. For example, attendees would role-play situations where they interacted with passengers of different backgrounds, discussing afterward how biases might influence their decisions. The boy loved attending these workshops, especially when kids his age participated. He enjoyed sharing his story with them, not because he wanted sympathy, but because he hoped it would inspire them to think differently. I used to feel scared after what happened to me, he told a group of students during one session. But now I know that standing up for yourself and for others is important. You can make a difference even if you're young. His words resonated deeply with the audience. Many of the kids approached him afterward, asking questions or thanking him for being brave enough to share his experience. Some even promised to start speaking up when they noticed unfairness around them. Seeing this impact filled the boy with pride and reinforced his belief that his voice mattered. In addition to the workshops, the family collaborated with civil rights organizations to push for policy changes at airports nationwide. They worked closely with lawmakers to draft legislation aimed at increasing accountability within transportation security agencies. One of their key proposals involved requiring regular audits of screening practices to ensure compliance with anti-discrimination laws. Another focused on improving customer feedback mechanisms, making it easier for travelers to report incidents of bias without fear of retaliation. Their efforts weren't limited to policy work, though. Recognizing the importance of storytelling in driving social change, the family partnered with filmmakers to create a documentary about their experience. The film highlighted not only the incident at the airport but also the broader context of racial profiling and systemic inequality. Through interviews with experts, activists, and everyday individuals affected by similar experiences, the documentary painted a vivid picture of the challenges faced by marginalized communities and offered solutions for moving forward. When the documentary premiered, it drew massive attention. Viewers praised its honesty and emotional depth, calling it both eye-opening and inspiring. It aired on several streaming platforms and was screened at film festivals, further amplifying its reach. The family attended many of these screenings, participating in Q&A sessions afterward. These events provided opportunities for meaningful conversations, allowing people to ask questions, share their thoughts, and connect over shared experiences. As the campaign grew, So did the family's influence. They became sought-after speakers, invited to conferences, panel discussions, and community gatherings across the country. Their message remained consistent. Change starts with awareness, but it requires action to truly take root. Whether addressing a room full of corporate executives or chatting with neighbors at a local park, they emphasized the importance of listening to those directly impacted by injustice and working collaboratively to find solutions. For the boy, this newfound platform came with both excitement and responsibility. At first, he felt nervous about speaking in front of large crowds, but with practice and plenty of encouragement from his parents, he grew more confident. He learned to channel his emotions into his speeches, using his story to highlight the need for empathy and understanding. By the time he delivered his 100th speech, he no longer doubted his ability to inspire others. Throughout this process, the family never lost sight of why they started Fly with Dignity. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about creating a safer, fairer world for everyone. They celebrated small victories along the way, like hearing from a traveler who reported being treated respectfully at an airport checkpoint thanks to the new training programs, or receiving letters from teachers who implemented the workshop materials in their classrooms and saw positive shifts in student attitudes. Of course, there were challenges too. Not everyone supported their efforts. Critics accused them of exaggerating the problem or politicizing a single incident. Some even dismissed their work as unnecessary, claiming that things were fine the way they were. But the family refused to let negativity deter them. Instead, they used criticism as fuel, doubling down on their commitment to spread awareness and drive change. By the end of the year, the impact of Fly with Dignity was undeniable. Airports began adopting the training, modules developed through the campaign, and several states passed legislation inspired by the family's proposals. Social media buzzed with stories of travelers praising TSA agents for their professionalism and courtesy. Even airlines got involved, launching initiatives to improve customer service and inclusivity. Through it all, the family stayed grounded, reminding themselves daily of the values that guided them: compassion, resilience, and hope. They knew the fight against bias and discrimination wouldn't end anytime soon, but they also knew they weren't alone. Thousands of people had joined their mission, proving that collective action could spark real progress. As they prepared for another trip, this time to celebrate the holidays with extended family, the boy looked around at the airport terminal with fresh eyes. Gone was the anxiety that once gripped him. In its place was a quiet confidence. He knew there was still work to be done, but he also knew he had the strength to keep pushing forward. After all, he had already shown the world that even the smallest voices could ignite the biggest changes. Months turned into years, and the family's efforts continued to bear fruit. The changes they had championed within the TSA and beyond weren't just surface-level fixes. They were deep-rooted shifts that began to reshape how people thought about fairness and equality in public spaces. Airports, once places of anxiety for many travelers of color, started becoming more welcoming environments. Reports of racial profiling dropped significantly, and passengers increasingly praised TSA agents for their professionalism and respect. For 8 years, the boy, life moved forward in ways he couldn't have imagined during those difficult days at the airport. He grew taller, wiser, and more confident with each passing year. His dream of becoming a pilot never faded. If anything, it burned brighter than ever. But now his ambition carried an added layer of purpose. He didn't just want to fly planes. He wanted to use his platform as a pilot to advocate for change. Whether speaking at aviation conferences or mentoring young students interested in flying, he envisioned himself as someone who could break barriers and inspire others to chase their dreams, no matter the obstacles. His parents watched him grow. With immense pride, they saw the resilience he had developed, the compassion he showed toward others, and the determination that fueled his every step. It wasn't lost on them how far he had come since that day when fear and confusion clouded his eyes. Now, whenever they looked at him, they saw not just their son but also a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of injustice, healing and growth were possible. The dad's role as a leader within the TSA evolved too. What started as a personal mission to protect his family transformed into a lifelong commitment to reforming systems plagued by bias. Under his leadership, the TSA became a model for other organizations striving to address discrimination. New hires underwent rigorous training programs focused on cultural competence and empathy. Senior staff regularly reviewed data to identify patterns of misconduct and implement corrective measures. Independent oversight committees remained active, ensuring transparency and accountability at every level. But the dad knew better than anyone that progress was fragile. Just because things improved didn't mean the work was done. He often reminded his team and himself that staying vigilant was crucial. "We can't afford to become complacent," he would say during meetings. "Every passenger deserves to feel safe and respected. If we let our guard down even for a moment, we risk undoing everything we've worked so hard to achieve." Meanwhile, the mom poured her energy into expanding Fly with Dignity. What began as a grassroots campaign had blossomed into a nationwide movement, touching countless lives. Schools adopted its curriculum, teaching children about fairness and inclusion from an early age. Corporations partnered with the organization to host diversity workshops for employees. Even local governments reached out, seeking advice on how to tackle systemic issues within their own institutions. One of the most rewarding aspects of the campaign was seeing how it brought people together. Families shared stories of overcoming prejudice. Strangers connected over shared experiences of fighting for justice. Entire communities rallied around the idea that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity, regardless of their background. These connections reminded the family that while their journey had been deeply personal, its impact was profoundly universal. As time went on, the boy found new ways to contribute to the cause. In high school, he joined the debate club, using his skills to argue for policies that promoted equity and inclusion. He participated in marches and rallies, standing shoulder to shoulder with activists working toward similar goals. And when he finally earned his pilot's license after years of dedication, he made sure to wear a badge that read, "Fairness takes flight." It was his way of reminding himself and others that justice wasn't confined to one area of life. It was something you carried with you wherever you went. The family's bond only strengthened as they navigated this path together. Dinner table conversations often revolved around updates on the campaign or discussions about current events related to racial justice. Sometimes the talks were serious, filled with reflections on challenges yet to overcome. Other times they were lighthearted, punctuated by laughter as they reminisced about funny moments along the way. Through it all, their love for one another served as the foundation that kept them grounded. Years later, as the boy prepared to board his first commercial flight as a certified pilot, emotions swirled inside him. Standing at the gate, dressed in his crisp uniform, he felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. This moment marked the culmination of a dream born out of adversity, shaped by resilience and fueled by purpose. As passengers filed onto the plane, some stopped to congratulate him, shaking his hand or offering words of encouragement. A few recognized him from news coverage of the family's advocacy work and thanked him for inspiring them to believe in change. When the plane lifted off the runway, the boy glanced out the window, marveling at the world below. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to reflect on how far he and his family had come. From the humiliation of being singled out at security to commanding a cockpit, his journey was proof that pain could transform into power. Back home, his parents watched the live stream of his inaugural flight, tears streaming down their faces. They thought about all the late nights spent strategizing, all the tough conversations about racism and inequality, and all the sacrifices they'd made to ensure their son grew up in a better world. In that moment, they realized their efforts hadn't just changed systems, they had shaped a legacy. That legacy extended far beyond their immediate circle. Countless individuals inspired by their story took action in their own lives, whether by challenging discriminatory practices at work, volunteering with advocacy groups, or simply treating others with kindness and respect. The ripple effect of their courage reached corners of society they might never see, but always hoped to touch. By the time the boy landed safely at his destination, he knew his journey was just beginning. Becoming a pilot wasn't the end goal. It was a stepping stone to something greater. He envisioned a future where air travel represented freedom, not just for some, but for everyone. Where no child had to endure what he did at the hands of bias and ignorance. And where people everywhere understood that true safety came not from walls or scanners, but from fostering trust and humanity. As he walked off the plane, greeted by applause from passengers and crew alike, he smiled, not because of the attention, but because of the promise it represented. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready. Ready to soar higher, fight harder, and continue building a world where dignity wasn't a privilege but a right. And so the family's story became more than just theirs. It became a testament to the enduring power of love, resilience, and collective action. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. That even when the odds seemed insurmountable, courage could prevail. And that while the scars of injustice might linger, they could also serve as reminders of the strength it takes to heal and the hope it takes to keep moving forward.